You know, I always had an interest in law enforcement early on as a kid. And I think that being able to contribute to the community, being able to help to protect society was always something that was really important to me. You know, there's been espionage throughout the world for thousands of years, and our adversaries have always adapted to new types of technology. They've adapted to changes in society. The advent of the internet has just provided a whole new methodology for the adversary. And with the depth and breadth of internet access, the number of people that are online, that are communicating, that are storing their data online, transmitting data, storing data, it just provides a fertile ground for those adversaries. I realized probably about 10 years ago that this was going to be one of the most significant challenges that we face as a nation, both from an economic and a national security perspective, and worked really hard to help position the FBI in the United States to counter those types of attacks. I think it really was just the movement of companies to the network, where retailers moved to the network, banks moved to the network, corporations were working online, they had distributed services and they were collaborating online. And because they were pushing more data to the network, it just seemed like it was a logical vector for the adversaries to move to, because the target was getting significantly larger. The other piece of that was the ease for the adversary. So for so many years, if somebody wanted to grab secrets, they had to break into a building, they had to compromise somebody who worked in a particular facility in order to get access to the intelligence, to the information. With the structure of the network and the way things are communicated, anybody from anywhere in the world has the ability to reach out and touch that data. So that, to me, was just kind of an aha moment that this is really going to be a problem and a challenge for all of us. One of the things I always knew was critical to our success in countering the adversaries was partnerships in a lot of different ways, primarily at the international level. It was really critical for us to partner with foreign law enforcement agencies, foreign intelligence services, and the private sector around the world. The private sector owns the vast majority of the networks. The private sector understands and sees the threat oftentimes well before anybody in law enforcement or government sees it, and it was critical to have those partnerships. So building those partnerships, developing those partnerships were the first steps to intelligence sharing and allowing us to provide information that was actionable by our partners, whether they be the private sector, whether it be foreign partners. Those were the first key steps in sharing intelligence. There are three different target groups that we've identified primarily. One being organized crime groups that are collaborating online, targeting primarily the financial services sector. It's probably a multi-billion-dollar threat on an annual basis. The other group that is of substantial importance is foreign intelligence services, where foreign governments are seeking out to steal data from the .mil sites, .gov, and the .com world. And so primarily in the U.S. manufacturing, in corporate research and development, intellectual property and the like, it's just a treasure trove of information. And those foreign services, those state governments, are constantly looking to tap into those networks to enhance their organizations, enhance their governments, to provide their companies with a competitive advantage. And that threat is really substantial. The final part of this three-pronged threat, I think, is terrorist groups. And we know that there are groups that have an intent to harm Western society through attacks on critical infrastructure, the same way they've done for decades using kinetic strikes. They also recognize the value and the depth and breadth of the networks and what an attack on those networks would do to impact society, the same way it's been done for years through bombs. I think the offense far outpaces the defense, and those threat actors that have a very deliberate program set up, they have a strategy that's been put in place, they are very sophisticated, they are well versed in the TTPs, the tools, the tactics, the procedures. They understand what it takes to make ingress into a network, and they are really profiting from that in a variety of ways, not necessarily from a financial perspective, but also from a strategic perspective. Offense outpaces the defense, and any determined adversary with enough time is going to breach most any network. It's really hard to quantify the number of companies, but I would find it very hard to believe that there's any company of substance that's not been breached. And in fact, in my time within the FBI, we had many occasions where we identified a company had been breached in the course of another investigation, and we actually showed up at their corporate headquarters knocking on the door, and we told them that they'd been breached. We told them what they'd lost, where the ingress had been made, and in many cases they'd been breached for months, and in certain cases actually years, and they never knew it. And they were absolutely shocked that we were able to identify they'd been breached, and they had no concept whatsoever about how substantial that threat was. So I think that there are two types of companies. There are companies that have been breached, and there are companies that have been breached but don't know it yet. I think the threat is going to continue to expand. The movement to mobile devices is a serious threat. I see people now that are introducing mobile devices, personal devices, onto their corporate networks and their government networks, not always thinking about the security issues. I see the adversaries continuing to enhance and build out their offensive capabilities. I just don't see this as anything that's going to go away. Certainly in my lifetime. I think it requires us to change our strategy and our tactics, how we attack the problem. We can't just continue to play defense forever, indefinitely. You can only get punched in the face so many times before you fall down to your knees. And I think that the ability to utilize intelligence, to be more proactive and more strategic, and to move companies towards that proactive defense is really critical for us to be successful. So I see a lot of changes on the horizon. I think that we can be successful, but it's going to require a new strategy, and it's going to require new capabilities. And I think CrowdStrike provides that opportunity. You know, I think it really is a multi-factor response to protecting the networks. People talk about technology, and I've said publicly many times that under the current environment that this was not sustainable, that companies could not survive in the current environment for a long period of time. And technology is a piece of the answer, but it's not the sole answer. And there's a human element to this. And one of the things that I promoted heavily in the Bureau was us mitigating the threat. How do we identify who the adversary is? How do we understand and get a better sight picture on who they are through a better sharing of intelligence and a better understanding of their TTPs? Once we do that, it provides us an opportunity to reach out and touch them and to make the cost of attacking companies so much higher and make it much more difficult for the adversaries. I think that CEOs need to realize that they need to take a personal interest in this. I think that they need to be personally responsible and personally involved, because the threat to them, the threat to their sustainability, the threat to their continuity is so large that they need to take it seriously and they need to be engaged. So after 24 years, I had the required amount of time in service to retire. I was eligible to retire. One thing I always knew I wanted to do was I wanted to stay in this space. I felt like I was making a contribution to the security of our country, as the Executive Assistant Director in the FBI, and I was interested in an opportunity that will allow me to continue my pursuit of this mission. I've said for many, many years while working at the FBI that this is not a government solution. This is going to require the private sector to step up. The market was going to drive the need for private sector innovation, and it really was required because the U.S. government doesn't have the capability to protect the entire infrastructure. It's just not possible. When I saw the opportunity for CrowdStrike, when George Kurtz contacted me, I did a lot of soul searching, a lot of due diligence, and really wrestled with leaving the Bureau to come to the private sector. But after talking to him, looking at his vision, recognizing that the technology that CrowdStrike was developing really fell hand in hand and lined up exactly with my thoughts about what needed to be done in the private sector space, it really was a pretty easy decision for me at that point. I think the CrowdStrike vision and their technology is really one of the key factors, but also the leadership of CrowdStrike, primarily with the CEO and the CTO and the CFO, all of whom have tremendous experience working in this space. They've had success in the cybersecurity world previously, and for me, partnering with people like that was very important. Leaving the FBI, which is probably one of the most well-known brands in the world, one of the most well-respected brands in the world, it was not an easy decision. And I really did a lot of work on my own and a lot of soul searching to make that determination. But the opportunity to continue the fight in the cyberspace with a group of people that I think are highly capable, highly motivated, absolutely passionate, and they've got the desire to have an impact on the threat, the opportunity for me to partner with them and continue that fight was something I just couldn't walk away from. It's a big change for me. I think one of the things that we're working on heavily is just building out a world-class organization. I think that all comes down to people. One of the things that lured me to CrowdStrike were the people that they had hired and the team that they had assembled, and it really was a team of A players. I think we need to continue down that path, and I know that there are a number of folks who are interested in coming on board and being part of this process. I think they buy into the strategy. I think they recognize the need, and I think that they have passion for this mission. So it really is going to be just continuing to work hard to build a world-class group of people so that we can establish ourselves as a trustworthy organization, somebody that we can instill confidence in these organizations, that we are going to be a trusted partner, are going to help them better protect the most important assets within their organization. We are actively seeking cyber warriors, people who recognize the threat, are committed to this mission, and want to get into this as warriors because this is a sincere program. Mission at CrowdStrike.com, and we are looking for those resumes for those people who really separate themselves from the rest of the pack.